What are three things that I don't want to see the New York Giants do this offseason? I'm going to tell you coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina. Happy to have you with us on this Tuesday. We're coming to the end of the month of February, which means pretty soon the combine is going to kick in and then free agency. So there's a lot of stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks here in the NFL offseason calendar. And on today's show, I'm going to give you three things that I just don't want to see the Giants do this offseason. I mean, these things have been floated out there by other media sources and bloggers and whatnot, and I just don't want to see the Giants do these three things. So those are going to be the things we're going to talk about. We're also going to have a listener question at the end of the podcast. So stick around. Got a lot to cover on today's show, which, by the way, is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. All right, I've got three things that I do not want to see the Giants end up doing this offseason. Let's get into them. The first thing that I do not want to see happen, and this was floated, I think I saw this in a couple of spots, and I actually wrote an article about this over on Giants Country, but I don't want to see Daniel Jones have to play on the franchise tag. Now, here's the logic that was presented, why it makes sense for the Giants to give Daniel Jones the franchise tag. Basically, he had one good year in this new offensive system, and he was able to stay healthy, something that he wasn't able to do in each of his first three seasons in the NFL. So it was floated out there by someone that maybe the Giants should just forget about doing a full year, a multi-year deal for him, sign him to the franchise tag and let him prove that last year wasn't a fluke. Folks, no, I'm not buying that. And I if the Giants do that, then, as much as I love Joe Schoen and the job he's done, he should be fired if he does that. Seriously. I mean, outside of, the Giants and Daniel Jones not reaching a contract agreement, which, by the way, I think they're going to, there's no reason to say to Daniel, okay, just sign the franchise tag. And I'm going to tell you why. All right. The franchise tag, just so for those of you who don't remember, is $32.416 million. All right. That is fully guaranteed, ladies and gentlemen, which means that Daniel Jones, if he were to sign that franchise tag and play on it, will count for $32.416 million. Now, you guys are probably saying, but Pat, you know what? If he's going to get a contract that's going to average between 32 and 35, what's the difference? All right, a couple things, which I'll explain in just a moment. But first, let me just point something out here. If they sign Daniel Jones to that franchise tag and he plays on it, that means their cap space gets reduced to $14.317 million. And that is before anything is done with the Kenny Golladay contract. Kenny Golladay, if he's a pre-June 1st cut, not going to yield all that much. I think it's going to be slightly north of $6 million in cap savings. After June 1st, it raises, I think it's, I want to say 14 or 16 million, but the Giants won't have that money available to them to use until after June 1st. So that's the number one reason why, if you're the Giants, you just don't sign Daniel Jones to the franchise tag. You just don't. So again, going back to those of you who are saying, but Pat, they are likely going to pay him between 32 and 35 million a year anyway. So what's the difference? The difference, as I've explained in previous shows, last week, check out my contract for Daniel Jones pod, by the way, and I explained this in detail, but the difference is that the first year of a multi-year deal is usually below the APY, which makes it easier now if you want to sign other guys, if you want to do other moves, if you want to extend the Dexter Lawrence, if you want to re-sign a Saquon Barkley, if you want to, add guys to the roster. All right. So Daniel Jones, even if he signs a contract that pays him, say, 35 million APY, chances are the first year of that deal are going to be low. And the reason why it's going to be low is because of the cash payout, which simply means that Daniel will probably get a signing bonus, which for accounting purposes is prorated over 5 years, or the length of the contract up to 5 years. But he's getting cash, so they can afford to basically lower his base salary. And that makes more sense to do it that way. So he's not really playing on a 32 APY or 35 or whatever the APY is. He's playing for less on the first year of that deal. And you want to stagger those, by the way, so that, when the second year comes around and that number jumps up, they still have, enough wiggle room now to add other guys. So to me, this is what I have been saying I would do with Daniel Jones and a contract. And I'm sticking to this story, folks. I would do a contract of no more than 5 years to help spread out the signing bonus. I would drive a lot of guaranteed money his way in the first 3 years of the deal. And then I would look for an out after the first 3 years. You've got to have an escape hatch in these contracts, right? I don't see Daniel Jones getting a fully guaranteed deal. Doesn't make sense. So that being said, for those who think, just sign him to the franchise tag and be done with it, and let Saquon Barkley walk. The financial ramifications are going to choke the Giants' cap. And again, this is before anything is done with Kenny Galladay's contract or Leonard Williams' contract, which I'm going to talk about a little later. So the franchise tag, if they have to use it for Daniel Jones by that March 7th deadline, that would be using it as a placeholder, because the minute you assign that tag, that's as soon as the money comes out of your pot. It's not like, oh, he's been tagged, but they still have the money available to spend. No, regardless if he signs that franchise tag, that money comes out of the pot. So you don't want to do that if you're the Giants. So those who have said that, disagree 100% on that is not the way to go. All right, I got a couple more for you. Coming up next, I'm going to talk about Saquon, and also I've got a thought or two about Leonard Williams. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hey, Giant fans, the NFL season might be over, but the NBA season is in full swing, and now is the perfect time to download the FanDuel Sportsbook app, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 if their first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to the spread and more. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss this chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 bonus bets when you download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. You can go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We are still 5 days a week, free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And before I get into points 2 and 3, which I teased in the last segment, Saquon Barkley and Leonard Williams, just real quick programming notes. Locked On Giants Live is coming back this week. I will have a date for you as soon as I can. Disclaimer, I'm taping this particular show on a Sunday, so I haven't heard back yet from Tana and Dog, but I have a feeling it's going to be Thursday, the show, but I will post something in YouTube for that and let you know. I'm also going to have on the show this week, one of my new colleagues over at the Locked On Podcast Network. It is Damian Parson, who is a scout for the for the Draft Network. and he is now one of the co-hosts of Locked On NFL Draft. So I'm really excited to talk to him, somebody who we haven't had on the show before. I like to get different perspectives on, especially about the draft, because that's something that even though I'm trying to get caught up on, I'm still not probably where I need to be, but I will become draft time. Promise you that. But it helps to get some of these different voices on the show. So hope you will tune in for that. That will likely be Friday's show. So that's the plan for the Locked On Giants podcast. All right, let's get back to my list of 3 things I do not want to see the Giants do this offseason. Spoke about Daniel Jones in the last segment, and I mentioned Saquon Barkley as being another one. Now, a lot of people out there are like, just let Saquon walk away. I am not one of them. I would like to see Saquon back, but not at a APY to exceed $13 million a year. There continue to be reports that he is looking for more than that there is a gap between the Giants and Barkley's representatives. I don't know how big that gap is, but it sounds like it's sizable. And I'm sorry, I don't see Barkley being in the same category as McCaffrey. I've said that before. I think Barkley probably fits kind of in the same category as maybe a Nick Chubb, who, albeit he was a second-round draft pick, Nick Chubb, to me, just, I think overall a little bit more productive, obviously, more available than Barkley. And I hate to use injuries as a factor here, but I have to here. Injuries are not the guy's fault, but the best ability is availability. So you got to factor that in. But let me give you some numbers here, why I think, Barkley should get a deal somewhere in the same neighborhood as Chubb, although with a slight raise for inflation purposes, because I think Chubb signed his deal in 2020 and now, so that was a couple of years ago. So here's what I'm thinking. All right, Chubb has four straight 1,000-yard rushing seasons, the last 4 years. Barkley has 3, including his second season in the league, where he just tipped the scales by 3 yards. And again, I know it's because of injuries and whatnot, but you got to look at production. You got to look at the overall thing here. Chubb has averaged 5.2 yards per carry in 2022. He also has at least 22 broken tackles per season. Barkley has, let me see, he exceeded 16 broken tackles just once, that in his rookie season. So he's not really a big tackle breaker. His yards after contact, 1.9 this year, averages 4.5 yards per carry. All right. So again, I could see giving him a slight raise over what Chubb's APY is, but not much more than that. You want to give him more guaranteed money, fine. But I think also the fact that, Barkley would probably figure 29, 30 years old, depending on the length of the contract. By the time the contract ends, you're going to want an escape hatch. So I would not go crazy with money for Barkley. I like the guy. I think he's a valuable piece of the offense. Interestingly, they didn't use him as much in the passing game as, I thought they would. Certainly not as much as he was utilized in his rookie season. And I don't have the stats in front of me. I got to go back and look at it. I guess I could look at the AP, the average air yards and the average yards per catch. But I'm pretty sure a lot of Barkley's passes this past year, at any rate, I didn't see a whole lot of downfield stuff. Matter of fact, we didn't see a whole lot of downfield stuff in general. Now, whether that's to come, if he's back, I don't know. But again, you've got to look at what's on paper, not project and say, oh, well, he's going to run for 2,000 yards in 2023 and have 1,000 yards receiving and, 20 big plays, big pass receptions of 20 plus yards. You can't do that, because if you start basing it on potential, you're going to screw your cap up. So I like Barkley. I like to see him back. great player, great locker room presence, a leader, great representative of the organization, but not at more than 13 million tops APY. So we'll see if the Giants and his, Barkley's agent can close the gap. According to the latest reports, there's still a gap there. This being in the New York Post, they reported that there is still a gap. How big of a gap, I don't know, but hopefully the two sides are inching closer to one another. And with the combine coming up, hopefully something gets done then. Usually the combine is when you see a lot of contracts start to fall into place, because now you got people sitting face to face across the table from each other, which is a lot better, I think, than doing Zoom calls or telephone calls or whatnot. We'll see if that gets done. The combine, I think, is going to be a very important week for the Giants, not just in terms of scouting future draft picks, but in terms of getting some of these contracts done. All right, the third and final thing that I have that I do not want to see the Giants do, and I've seen this mentioned on my Twitter feed, and folks, I am so against this. It's not funny. People have said that the Giants should cut Leonard Williams. And for the life of me, I don't understand why. I really don't. Let's look at the savings. All right. If Leonard Williams were cut, his pre-June 1st cap savings is $12.04 million with $20.22 dead money. Come on. Post June 1st, the savings jumps up to $18 million. $14.26 million gets dumped into the 2023 dead money ledger, with the balance hitting the 2024 ledger. All right. Now, to be fair, to kind of, figure out why people might be saying cut Leonard Williams. His production has declined. All right. He's had some injury issues the last couple of years. I get that, including this year where he missed his first starts of his career. The production part, there is a drop in his negative plays, specifically sacks, but tackles for a loss and quarterback hits are about even from this year to the previous year. So I don't think there's been that big of a drop. So, look, Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence, I don't think that duo gets enough credit for being a dynamic duo. I always talk about having a dynamic dual pass rushing tandem, which hopefully the Giants now have with Azeez Ojulari and Kayvon Thibodeau. But Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence together, they do some serious, disruption and damage in the middle of that, that pit, if you will. So to take Leonard Williams out of the equation just doesn't make sense. What I would do if I'm the Giants, I would definitely extend his deal to lower the 32 million cap number. Absolutely. I don't think he can play on that number. Maybe I would try and get that number down to about 15.75 billion, based on his injury history and the production and whatnot. Also, based on a potential that his snaps are going to be reduced. I mean, Leonard Williams has been playing more than 70% of the Giants' defensive snaps now for a couple of years. I would like to see him maybe get about 60 to 65%, because the more snaps you give these guys, especially the defensive linemen in the pit, you're going to wear them out. And this is a problem that the Giants currently have. They don't have defensive line depth. So Dexter Lawrence had to play ungodly snap numbers. Leonard Williams, when he was in there, had to play ungodly snap numbers. You're going to wear these guys out. So, defensive line depth is got to be a priority for the Giants. It's not something that's talked about a lot. It should be, though. Now, they've got guys that they brought in last year that are going to be free agents. Nick Williams, I don't think he'll be back. Justin Ellis, I don't see him being back. DJ Davidson, a draft pick, will he be healthy by the time the season starts? I don't know. I don't know where he is in his rehab. They've got Ryder Anderson, but they need more on that defensive line. They absolutely need more on that defensive line because Leonard Williams, you just, the older he gets, you can't ask him to carry such a heavy workload. And the same holds true, by the way, for Dexter Lawrence. You saw this past year that the Giants had to manage his practice snaps because he was just carrying such a heavy workload. And you just can't have that. Otherwise, you're going to wear these guys out. And isn't it better to keep them fresh so that they can contribute down the line for multiple years? I would think so, especially when you don't have anybody immediately available to replace them. So that's how I would handle it with Leonard Williams. I would not cut him. I think that's ludicrous. I'm sorry if you feel that way, but I disagree. It's ludicrous. So those are the three items that I don't want to see the Giants do this offseason. There are probably more, but those are the three that, came to mind for me. All right. Coming up next, I've got a listener submitted mailbag question. I'm going to answer that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Built Bar. Looking for a delicious treat, but don't want all the fat and calories? Then you got to try a Built Bar. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate, and they come in unbelievably great flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and my personal favorite, coconut almond. These delicious protein bars taste like a candy bar, but without the guilt. Most Built Bars have about 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't have to wait anymore for your box to be delivered from Built.com. Just simply pop into your local Walmart or Sam's Club and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can thank me later. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Appreciate you tuning in and hanging out with me for a little bit here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Now we're going to do a listener mailbag submitted question. And this one comes from Greg W., who is also a reader over at Giants Country, which is where I do all my written work. So that's the URL up there, giantscountry.com. Here's what Greg writes. He goes, do you feel when it comes to the process of signing players to new contracts, whether it's your own player or a free agent from another team, the annual amount of the contract seems to garner the most media attention and public attention, but the far more important factors lie in the terms of the contract, i.e. the ability to manage the cap implications, length, and voidable years? And then why do people seem so hung up on whether Saquon is 12 million or 15 million when far more importantly, the balance needs to be struck? Okay, Greg, thank you for the question. Yes, I do think sometimes people get a little hung up on the total value of a contract and the APY. The important numbers to look at with a contract, guaranteed money. That's what you want to look at because that is the money that is going to be paid out. Now, the other thing you want to look at, obviously, is the structure of the deal. So let's take Saquon, for example. Let's say Saquon gets an average APY of 12 million with a possibility, if incentives are met, to swell that contract up to 15 million. Well, what are the incentives in there that would potentially escalate that amount? That's what I would want to know. So a lot of times when a deal is reported, it's best to wait till all the terms come out. And they do come out eventually because the total value means nothing. Very few players, it seems these days, make it to the end of a contract. That's not their rookie deal. So you can't go, getting excited over, oh my God, the Giants got, Saquon Barkley for 12 million a year, or, oh my God, they got him for 15 million a year. No, you got to see what's the structure of the contract. What is the guaranteed money? That's what I'd be interested in. And that's the first thing I look at. Where is the out in the contract? Can they get out of it after 2 years or 3 years, whatever the case may be? So, I think that's, I think you're right. People do hone in on the APY, but look, that's really a starting point, I think, for a lot of contracts, because, if we say, oh, Daniel Jones should get a 5-year deal, 160 million, Okay, what does that come out to APY? And is that compatible with what his peers are getting? And here's the other thing that you need to keep in mind, Greg. Contracts, even though they are technically multiple years, they're technically 1-year deals, a series of 1-year deals, because the money raises, the base salary goes up. There are maybe different incentives or different terms. So it's really a cluster of 1-year deals. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, because, you think of a contract, a lot of times it's like pretty much the same terms with maybe a slight tweak here and there. But in the NFL, each year is different, and the contracts are adjusted based on projections on what the cap's going to be and what percentage the team feels that player should take up on the overall team cap. So hopefully that answers your question. And hopefully we'll see you at the salary cap show, the live show that's coming up this week. I'll be covering a little bit more of details on salary cap stuff, answering your questions specifically, anybody who comes with questions. All right. I think, did I have one more question that popped in? I think there was, yeah, here it is. This was kind of this is a email that was sent to me by Robert D. And it's not so much a question, it's more of a statement. So I'm going to read it to you and then I'll comment on it. He writes, the Giants need to stop apologizing for Jones's slow adaptation to the necessary skills to play NFL football successfully. Many outstanding players learn on their own what Daniel needed Brian Daboll's special abilities to instill. Pull the Daboll rug out and Daniel will revert to his old ways. I hope Shane isn't going to live in cap hell forever with overpaid players. The first year of DJ's contract can't exceed $20 million. Oof, Robert. I'm sorry, my friend. This is so far off. I know it's your opinion. I respect your opinion, but it's not happening, my friend. Daniel's not playing for 20 million APY. He's not playing for anything less than that franchise tag. And your statement that you quote unquote pull the Daboll rug out from under Jones. First off, where's Daboll going? Is he getting fired? And maybe I missed the memo. Come on, man. Come on. Daboll's going to be around hopefully for a number of years. So I just don't understand your letter, Robert. I really don't. If he's around, why wouldn't you think that Daniel Jones is going to keep developing? Daniel Jones didn't have stability for how many years? The first, 3 years of his career? He had different coordinators, different head coaches. He didn't have a good supporting cast. Come on, Robert. I know you know better than that. Come on, man. And by the way, how do you know Daniel's going to revert back? How do you know? What did you see in Daniel Jones's play that convinces you that he's going to revert back to what the player he was the first 3 years of his career? Seriously, man. I respect your opinion, but I think you're really, you missed the boat on this one. 20 million APY? No, not for a starting quarterback. No. Maybe for a quarterback on a rookie deal, but not in this case. I mean, if Daniel Jones's agent allows him to sign a deal for 20 million APY, he should fire him. I would fire him. It's just not happening. You might not be a Daniel Jones fan, and I'm guessing from your letter you're not, but the Giants are sold on him, and they're gonna pay him, and it ain't gonna be 20 million APY. And I don't know what it's gonna be in the first year, but because like I said, the first year of contracts are generally lower than the advertised APY. But Daniel Jones is going to be back, barring something really, really screwy happening. So anyway, thank you for the question. Thank you for listening and reading. Thank you all for tuning in to the Locked On Giants podcast. That'll do it for today's show. Tune in tomorrow. I'll have a brand new episode for you as we continue to take you through the rest of the week, counting down to the NFL Combine, which is going to kick off very, very soon. So until then, everybody have a great one. We will talk to you again soon.